Have you ever seen someone divide a single plate of food into 3 unequal parts, taking the smallest portion for themselves so their kids could eat a little more? Leonard, a 9-year-old millionaire, had never witnessed anything like it until that November afternoon in Pioneer Plaza in Dallas. Sitting on a weathered wooden bench, Karina held a white container while her little ones, Julian and Camila, waited with eyes shining from hunger. He watched as she carefully divided each portion, giving them the best while her hands trembled from weakness. In that instant, something inside Leonard broke. Stay until the end to discover how a simple act of kindness transformed 4 lives forever. Leonard walked through Pioneer Plaza, as he had every afternoon for the past 2 months. His Italian leather shoes stepped on the grey pavement, while the November sun painted long shadows among the oak trees. He kept his hands in the pockets of his dark brown dress pants, and his white linen shirt was slightly wrinkled, something unthinkable months ago when his father was still alive. Mr. Robert had passed away in September, leaving an immense void in his only son's chest. For 39 years, Leonard had built his real estate empire with iron discipline, but he never learned to build bridges with people. His father always told him, "Son, go out on the street and listen to real life, because money can give you everything except humanity." Now, fulfilling that last request, Leonard wandered among hot dog vendors, kids playing soccer, and couples holding hands. He observed everything from a distance, like looking through thick glass. The city noise surrounded him but didn't touch him, as if he were a ghost among the living. That Wednesday afternoon, the air carried a mixed aroma of fresh pretzels and damp earth from the garden watering. Leonard stopped in front of the central fountain, where water fell in circular cascades, creating a constant melody. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to connect with something he couldn't define. His mind wandered between memories of his father in the hospital, his weak but firm voice telling him to stop living like a machine. He had inherited 3 commercial buildings, 2 residential developments, and a 7-figure bank account, but none of those things filled the hole he felt every morning upon waking. He opened his eyes and continued his usual route to the east side of the plaza, where the trees were denser and there were fewer people. He needed silence, though that silence was slowly killing him. His therapist had said grief takes time, but Leonard didn't know how to process pain after spending his whole life avoiding emotions. While turning onto the gravel path, something caught his attention unexpectedly. On a bench far away, under the shade of a huge maple tree, sat a young woman with 2 small children. The first thing he noticed was how thin she looked, with slumped shoulders and a slightly hunched back. She wore a simple olive-green dress that had seen better days and an oversized beige sweater. The children, a boy about 8 years old and a younger girl, wore clean but worn clothes. The woman held a white container on her lap and with a plastic spoon divided the contents into 3 unequal portions. Leonard slowed his pace without knowing why. There was something in that scene that nailed him to the ground. He saw her serve the food onto foam plates, 2 generous portions for the children and a minimal one for herself. The little ones ate with evident appetite while she barely took a bite. Her hands trembled slightly as she brought the spoon to her mouth. Leonard stood paralyzed a few meters away, watching from the side of the path. The woman hadn't seen him because she was focused on her kids, making sure they ate well. The older boy, with unevenly cut black hair, said something to his little sister that made her smile. It was a weak but genuine smile. Leonard felt a tightness in his chest he hadn't experienced in years. He remembered his father's words, "When you see someone struggling, don't look away like cowards do." For decades, he had been exactly that, an emotional coward who avoided getting involved with others' pain. He built walls so high that even he couldn't see beyond them. But now, standing before this unknown family, something began to crack inside him. The woman looked up at the sky as if speaking to someone invisible, and Leonard could see the tears held back in her eyes. They weren't tears of self-pity, but of a mother fighting to maintain dignity in front of her children. He was about to keep walking, to continue his empty routine and return to his 3-story house in Highland Park. But then the woman swayed slightly, bringing a hand to her forehead. The children looked at her scared, and the older one grabbed her arm with concern. Leonard saw her make an effort to smile, reassuring them with words he couldn't hear. He breathed deeply, trying to control the tremor running through his body. He knew something very serious was happening right before his eyes. The afternoon continued its normal course around them. Couples strolled, vendors offered their products, Pigeons pecked at crumbs on the ground. But on that bench, under the maple's shade, a silent tragedy unfolded that no one else seemed to notice. Leonard clenched his fists in his pockets and took the first step toward them. For the first time in 2 months, he felt his life was about to have a purpose beyond money. Leonard advanced slowly toward the bench with his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. He didn't know exactly what he would say or how. He just knew he couldn't stand by. The woman was still trying to eat her small portion while the children finished their plates. The older boy had noticed his presence and looked at him with distrust. That kind of look kids develop who learn to protect themselves too soon. Leonard cleared his throat when he was 2 meters away. The woman looked up surprised, and he could see up close her golden honey-colored eyes, full of fatigue but also an unbreakable spark of dignity. She had a delicate face, marked by sleepless nights, and her light brown skin was pale from malnutrition. Leonard searched for the right words in his mind, but they all sounded clumsy or condescending. Finally, with a softer voice than usual, he said, "Excuse me, ma'am. Forgive me for intruding, but are you okay?" Karina stared at him, trying to decipher his intentions. She had learned to read people during her years as a house cleaner. And this man didn't seem to have bad intentions, though his expensive clothes and shiny shoes placed him in a completely different world from hers. She straightened on the bench, adjusting her beige sweater as if wanting to look more presentable. Her lips trembled slightly before responding. "We're fine, sir. Thanks for asking." Leonard noticed how her voice cracked at the end of the sentence and how her knuckles turned white gripping the plastic spoon. The older boy moved closer to his mother, protective, while the little girl watched Leonard with childish curiosity. "Forgive me for insisting," he continued, trying to sound as non-invasive as possible, "but I see you trembling and it worries me. Can I help you with anything? Do you need me to call someone?" The afternoon was starting to cool, and a gentle breeze moved the leaves of the maple above their heads. Karina shook her head, keeping that polite smile she had perfected to hide her desperation. "Really, sir, we're fine," she repeated with more firmness, though her body said otherwise. "I have faith in God that He'll take care of us. He always has." Leonard sensed the conviction in her words, but also the fragility of her physical state. He wasn't a religious man, but he respected others' faith, especially when it seemed to be the only thing holding this woman up. He stood there, feeling useless with all his money and properties. What good was having so much if he couldn't help someone who clearly needed it? "When was the last time you ate well?" he asked directly, without beating around the bush. Karina looked down, ashamed. Julian clenched his fists, wanting to defend his mother but not knowing how. Camila set down her empty plate and hugged Karina's arm, sensing the tension in the air. Leonard sighed, running a hand through his dark brown hair. He was about to insist when something terrible happened. Camila let go of her mother's arm and slid off the bench toward the ground. Everything happened in slow motion. The girl tried to take a step, but her legs didn't respond. Her eyes closed, and her small body collapsed onto the gravel path. Karina screamed her name in desperation, dropping the container that bounced against the pavement, spilling the last remnants of rice. Julian lunged toward his sister, shouting, "Camila, Camila," with panic in his voice. Leonard reacted on instinct, kneeling beside the girl and checking her pulse on her neck with trembling fingers. Her heart was beating, but weakly. The little one had dry, cracked lips, and her skin was cold to the touch. "She's fainted," Leonard exclaimed, feeling a surge of adrenaline through his body. Karina trembled uncontrollably, trying to lift her daughter while tears streamed down her cheeks. "My baby, oh God, my baby," Julian cried, clinging to his mother's back, terrified. The scene drew the attention of some nearby people who approached to ask what was happening. Leonard made a split-second decision. Without asking permission, he lifted Camila carefully in his arms. The girl weighed alarmingly little for her age. "We're going to the hospital now," he ordered, with an authority that allowed no argument. Karina looked at him with wide eyes, between fear and hope. "But sir, I don't have money for—" "It doesn't matter about the money," Leonard interrupted, already walking quickly toward the plaza exit where he had left his silver Mercedes SUV. "Come with me, quick." Karina took Julian's hand and ran behind him, her heart shattered and legs shaking. Leonard located his vehicle, unlocked it with the remote, and opened the back door. He gently placed Camila on the seat, while Karina and Julian climbed in quickly. He got behind the wheel, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot with controlled but urgent speed. The nearest private hospital was 10 minutes away, but every second counted. Karina hugged Camila in the back seat, murmuring prayers with a broken voice. Julian cried silently, wiping his tears with the back of his dirty hand. Leonard drove with his jaw clenched and hands firm on the wheel. And as the streets of Dallas sped by the window, none of the four imagined that this moment of panic was the start of something that would change their lives forever. Leonard's SUV cut through the streets of downtown Dallas like a silver arrow amid the afternoon traffic. He ran yellow lights, dodged delivery trucks, and accelerated down avenues he knew by heart from years of building businesses in this city. In the back seat, Karina held Camila against her chest, feeling her daughter's weak breathing against her neck. Julian sat glued to the window with red eyes from crying so much, hands clenched into fists on his legs. Leonard glanced in the rear-view mirror every few seconds, checking the little one's condition. "Hang in there, princess. We're almost there," he murmured through gritted teeth, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. His mind raced. He knew Dr. Ramirez, director of St. Joseph's Hospital, one of the best private centers in the city. He had donated money for their new pediatric wing last year. That had to count for something. His hands sweated on the leather steering wheel as he turned onto Constitution Avenue. 7 minutes had passed since leaving the plaza. 3 more minutes, and they'd be in the ER. The hospital appeared before them like a fortress of glass and white concrete, imposing and modern. Leonard braked with a screech of tires in front of the emergency entrance, not caring that he was blocking the way. He jumped out of the vehicle, opened the back door, and extended his arms. "Let me carry her," he said to Karina firmly. She looked at him doubtful for an instant, but urgency overcame any hesitation. She handed over Camila, who was still unconscious with her head hanging to one side. Leonard held her carefully and ran toward the automatic doors that opened with a soft whoosh. The air conditioning inside hit him along with the characteristic smell of disinfectant and alcohol. "I need a doctor now," he shouted toward the reception desk, where a nurse in pink scrubs looked up alarmed. Karina and Julian entered behind him, frightened by the intense glow of the fluorescent lights and the unfamiliar environment. The nurse activated an emergency button, and in seconds 2 paramedics appeared with a rolling stretcher. Leonard placed Camila on the padded surface with trembling hands. "What happened? How long has she been unconscious?" asked one of the paramedics, while checking Camila's pupils with a small flashlight. Leonard looked at Karina, who stepped forward with a faltering voice. "She fainted about 10 minutes ago. She hasn't eaten well in days." The paramedic nodded gravely and began pushing the stretcher inside. "Come with me," Leonard indicated to Karina and Julian, following the quick pace of the wheels on the shiny floor. They passed through a corridor full of closed doors, bright lights, and the constant sound of electronic monitors. Karina squeezed Julian's hand so hard the boy winced in pain, but he didn't complain. They arrived at an emergency room, where a young doctor in a white coat was already waiting with a stethoscope around her neck. "Severe malnutrition," said the paramedic, as they transferred Camila to a hospital bed. The doctor began connecting cables and placing an oxygen mask over the girl's pale face. Karina covered her mouth to keep from screaming. Leonard approached the internal desk where an administrator with glasses looked at him expectantly. "I need her treated immediately, no matter the cost," he declared with a firm voice, pulling out his leather wallet from his back pocket. "All necessary tests, the best treatment available. I cover all expenses." The woman blinked, surprised, but nodded professionally. "I need your details and first, stabilize the girl," Leonard interrupted. "Here's my ID and credit card. Charge whatever is needed." He handed her a gold card that the administrator took carefully, as if it were glass. Karina watched the scene from the other side of the glass, separating the waiting room from the emergency area, unable to believe what was happening. This man, this complete stranger, was paying for her daughter's medical care without even knowing her name. Tears welled up in her eyes again, but this time not just from fear, but from overwhelming gratitude. Julian clung to her waist, hiding his face in her olive green dress. 30 minutes passed that felt like 30 hours. The doctor finally came out of the emergency room, removing her latex gloves with a tired but reassuring gesture. Leonard stood up immediately, followed by Karina, who nearly tripped over her own feet. "The girl is stable," announced the doctor with a professional but kind voice. "She has acute malnutrition and severe dehydration." We gave her IV fluids and are monitoring her vital signs. She'll need to stay admitted at least 3 days to recover and for us to do complete tests." Karina exhaled a deep sigh of relief that nearly buckled her knees. Leonard steadied her by the arm instinctively. "Can I see her?" Karina asked with a trembling voice. The doctor nodded. "Yes, come in. She's awake and asking for you." Mother and son entered, almost running into the room where Camila lay on a white bed with an IV in her thin arm and the oxygen mask still over her nose. Her eyes lit up when she saw them. "Mummy," she whispered weakly. Karina leaned over her, kissing her forehead over and over, while Julian took his sister's free hand. Leonard watched from the door with a lump in his throat, and in that moment he understood that the money he had accumulated for years finally had a real purpose: saving lives. 2 hours later, when Camila slept peacefully under the effect of the medications and with better color in her cheeks, Leonard invited Karina to get coffee in the hospital cafeteria. Julian had fallen asleep in a chair next to his sister's bed, exhausted from the scare and emotions. They went down to the first floor in a silent elevator, not looking directly at each other, but aware of the strange connection that had just formed between two strangers. The cafeteria was a spacious area with light wood tables and windows overlooking the hospital's inner garden. Leonard ordered 2 coffees and a sweet roll that Karina looked at with evident hunger but didn't dare touch. He pushed the plate toward her gently. "Please, eat. You need to regain strength." Karina hesitated only a second before taking the roll with trembling fingers and biting into it small. The sweet taste exploded in her mouth after days of barely eating. Leonard drank his black coffee, observing her discreetly, giving her space but staying present. "I don't know how to thank you for what you did for us," Karina began after swallowing, with eyes shining from held-back tears. "You don't know me. You don't know us." And yet, her voice broke and she had to stop to breathe deeply. Leonard shook his head, lowering his gaze to his coffee cup. "You don't have to thank me for anything. I did what any decent person would do." But both knew that wasn't true. In this city, like in all, people passed by others suffering every day. He had been one of them for 39 years. Karina finished the roll and sipped her coffee, feeling the warmth bring some life back to her exhausted body. Leonard cleared his throat, searching for the right words. "Forgive me if this sounds intrusive, but what happened to you? You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but maybe I can help in some way." Karina looked him in the eyes for the first time with attention. She saw fatigue in that gaze, but also genuine kindness. Something inside told her she could trust him. And then, with a faltering voice and pauses to control her crying, Karina told him her whole story. She spoke of her job as a house cleaner, cleaning homes for well-off families in Highland Park for $20 a day. She told how she had 5 steady clients until a month ago when Camila started getting sick with constant fevers and a cough that wouldn't go away. She had to miss several days to care for her, take her to the community clinic, where lines lasted hours and medications were scarce. The clients lost patience. 3 fired her immediately, the other 2 cut her days in half. Income dropped from $100 a week to barely $30. The money stopped covering the rent for the small room they lived in a modest neighborhood. Leonard listened in silence, with tensed jaw and white knuckles around his coffee cup. Karina continued recounting how her parents had died in a bus accident when she was 25, leaving her alone in the world with a boyfriend who promised to support her always. "I got pregnant with Julian when I was 26, Karina continued, wiping a tear rolling down her cheek. "Fernando, the kid's dad, worked in a factory. At first everything was fine. We were poor, but happy. Then Camila was born and things got tough. He started coming home late, sometimes not at all. He said he was working double shifts, but I knew he was lying." Her voice hardened as she remembered. "One early morning, 2 years ago, I woke up and he wasn't there. I checked the closet and all his clothes were gone. He left without saying anything, without leaving money, without saying goodbye to his kids." Leonard felt rage boiling in his chest. What kind of man abandons his family like that? Karina breathed deeply before continuing. "Later I found out he left debts. To an appliance store, a pawn shop, even the corner grocer. Everyone came looking for me. I had to pay what I could so they wouldn't sue me. I lost my savings, the few furniture we had, everything." She paused long, looking out the window toward the garden, where night lights were starting to turn on. "Since then it's been surviving day by day, Karina finished with a tired but firm voice. I work what I find, care for my kids as I can, and ask God for strength to keep going. Today we were in the plaza because we got evicted from the room we rented. The landlord got tired of waiting for the overdue payment. That container we had was the only thing we'd eaten in 2 days. Leonard closed his eyes, feeling ashamed of his own problems that now seemed insignificant. He mourned his father's death, while this woman fought, literally, to keep her kids alive. When he opened his eyes, his decision was made. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, looking at her intensely. Listen to me, Karina. My name is Leonard, by the way. She nodded weakly. What I'm going to propose might sound strange, but I ask you to consider it. I have a big house, too big for me. It just has empty rooms no one uses. I want you and your kids to stay there while Camila fully recovers. No rent, no commitment. Just stay until things get better. The silence that followed was so deep they could hear their own heartbeats. Karina stared at Leonard as if he had spoken in another language. Her mind tried to process what she had just heard, while her heart pounded wildly in her chest. This man, this stranger who had appeared like an angel in the plaza, was offering her a roof without asking for anything in return. For years, she had learned that nothing in life is free, that there's always a hidden price behind every favor. But when she looked into Leonard's eyes, she only saw sincerity and a deep sadness she recognized because she carried it herself every day. Mr. Leonard, I can't accept something like that, she murmured, lowering her gaze to her trembling hands on the table. I don't know you. You don't know me. Why would you do something like this for us? Leonard ran a hand through his hair, searching for the right words. Because my father taught me that money without purpose is just paper. Because I've been walking through that plaza for 2 months, feeling my life has no meaning. And because today, seeing you with your kids, I understood that maybe God put me there to help you. His voice cracked slightly, mentioning his father. Karina looked up, feeling hot tears rolling down her cheeks. I don't know what to say, she whispered, wiping the tears with the back of her hand. All my life I've had to fight alone, draw strength from where there was none. And now you appear like a miracle. Leonard shook his head gently. I'm no miracle, Karina. I'm just a man who has a lot and never knew how to share it until now. The house is empty. It has 4 rooms no one uses. There's food in the fridge that I end up throwing away because I can't eat it all. It has a yard where the kids can play. Please, accept it at least until Camila is fully recovered and you can look for work in peace. He paused, measuring his words. I'm not asking for anything in return. Just let me help. The sound of coffee cups being placed on other tables filled the silence between them. Karina closed her eyes, thinking of Julian sleeping exhausted in that hospital chair, of Camila hooked up to IVs because her body had no strength. She thought of the cold nights awaiting them on the streets if she didn't accept this help. And finally she thought that maybe God did hear her prayers. Okay, Karina said with a trembling but decided voice. I accept your help, but only temporarily. As soon as I get a job and save money, we'll leave. I don't want to be a burden to anyone. Leonard felt deep relief flood his body. You're no burden. On the contrary, you're doing me a favor by filling that house with life. He extended his hand across the table, and Karina shook it firmly, sealing an agreement neither imagined how much it would change their destinies. 3 days later, when Camila was discharged with instructions for rest and balanced nutrition, Leonard arrived at the hospital with his SUV to take them to his house in Highland Park. Karina carried a plastic bag with the few belongings they had salvaged, 2 changes of clothes for each child, a shared toothbrush, and a wrinkled photo of her parents. It was all they had left in the world. Julian stayed quiet, looking out the window as the city changed from humble neighborhoods to areas with huge houses and perfect lawns. Camila clung to her mother, still weak but with eyes bright from curiosity. Leonard's house was a 2-story building with a grey stone facade and wide windows that let in the sunlight. It had a front yard with impeccable green grass and an electric gate that opened with a button press. Karina held her breath, seeing the circular driveway with a stone fountain in the center. She had never been inside a house like this. She had only cleaned them from the outside. Leonard parked the SUV and invited them to get out with a kind gesture. Welcome, he said simply, opening the carved wooden front door. The interior was even more impressive. Beige marble floors, a wide staircase with wrought iron railing, living room with brown leather furniture, and a huge kitchen visible from the entrance. Everything was impeccably clean but curiously empty, as if no one really lived there. "I prepared 2 rooms on the 2nd floor," Leonard explained, leading them upstairs. "One for you, Karina, and another for the kids. They have their own bathrooms and closets. If you need anything else, just tell me." He opened the first door, revealing a room with a queen bed, wooden nightstand, and window overlooking the backyard. Julian and Camila ran into the 2nd room and screamed with excitement, seeing 2 twin beds with orange and green comforters, a small desk, and a shelf full of children's books. "Mummy, look, we have beds for each of us," Julian exclaimed with a huge smile that Karina hadn't seen on his face in months. Camila climbed onto one of the beds and bounced gently, laughing with pure joy that made Karina's eyes fill with tears again. Leonard watched from the door with hands in his pockets, feeling a warmth in his chest he hadn't experienced since his father's death. That night, after Leonard prepared pasta with tomato sauce and chicken in the kitchen, the 4 sat at the dining table. There was a plate for each, glasses with orange juice, and cloth napkins. Julian looked at his full plate with shining eyes, almost not believing all that food was for him. When everyone started eating, the boy turned to his sister and said excitedly, "Look, sis, there's a plate of food for each of us." Both Leonard and Karina looked at each other with tears in their eyes, understanding they had just witnessed a moment none would ever forget. The following weeks brought a new and strange routine for all. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like this video. May God bless your day with peace and joy. Leonard left early to oversee his properties and businesses, but returned every afternoon with a grocery bag full of fruits, vegetables, and meats that Karina prepared in the kitchen with surprising skill. She insisted from the first day on, contributing somehow, so she took care of cooking, cleaning, and keeping the house in order, though Leonard repeatedly told her it wasn't necessary. Julian started doing schoolwork at the desk in his room, catching up on the lost year with new notebooks Leonard bought without anyone asking. Camila gained weight and color in her cheeks, running around the yard chasing butterflies and laughing in a way her mother thought she'd never hear again. The house that had been dead for months now vibrated with voices, laughter, and the aroma of home-cooked food. Leonard discovered he enjoyed coming home, knowing someone was waiting. He no longer dined alone in front of the turned-off TV. Now he shared the table with simple conversations about the kids' school day or the recipes Karina had learned from her mother. One mid-December afternoon, Leonard arrived earlier than usual and found Karina in the living room sewing something by hand. The golden sunset light came through the window, illuminating her focused profile. She didn't hear him enter because she was absorbed in her work, moving the needle with precision and delicacy. Leonard stood watching from the entrance, fascinated by the skill of her hands. On the sofa was spread what looked like a peach-colored dress with delicate embroidery on the neckline. "What are you doing?" he asked with genuine curiosity. Karina jumped a little startled, bringing a hand to her chest. "Oh, Leonard, I didn't hear you come in." She blushed slightly and lowered the fabric to her lap. "It's just something I do to keep busy. I used to sew dresses to sell at the Sunday flea market." Leonard approached interested, circling the sofa to see better. The dress was beautiful, with neat finishes and an elegant design he didn't expect in a handmade piece. "You made this?" he asked, surprised, touching the fabric softly. Karina nodded shyly. "I learned to sew with my mom when I was 12, Karina explained while her fingers caressed the embroidery fondly. "She made dresses for quinceañeras and brides. I helped her after school. When she died, I kept sewing because it was the only way to feel her close." She paused, looking at the dress with nostalgia. "I sold my pieces at the Garland flea market on Sundays. I didn't earn much, $5 or $10 per dress, because people haggled a lot. But I liked seeing girls wear something I made with my hands." Leonard sat beside her on the sofa, processing this new information. "Why did you stop?" Karina sighed sadly. "Because to sew you need to buy fabrics, threads, buttons, zippers, all that costs money I didn't have. Plus, without a nice display or way to promote my work, hardly anyone came to my store. Women preferred buying at downtown stores, even if they were more expensive." She looked down ashamed. "This dress I'm making with scraps I found at a thrift store, just to not lose practice, even if I have nowhere to sell it." Leonard took the dress carefully, studying each stitch and detail of the embroidery. He wasn't a fashion expert, but he had built enough businesses to recognize quality when he saw it. This wasn't amateur work. It was genuine talent wasted for lack of opportunities. His mind started working on possibilities. Karina, this is art. It's not just a dress, it's a unique piece. She looked at him incredulous, used to her work being undervalued. How many dresses could you make in a month if you had all the materials you need? Karina blinked, confused by the question. Well, depending on the design, maybe 8 or 10 if I dedicate myself fully. Leonard nodded thoughtfully, already forming a plan in his head. And if you had a proper place to work, a workshop with good light, a professional sewing machine, quality fabrics. Karina's eyes widened. Leonard, I don't know what you're talking about, but those things cost a fortune. I could never. He raised a hand to stop her. What would you think if we turned the downstairs room, the one next to the yard, into your workshop? Karina's heart started pounding so hard she thought he could hear it. Over the next 10 days, Leonard hired a carpenter to install wide shelves in the empty room that had been his father's study. He bought an Industrial Brothers sewing machine, 2 professional mannequins, a large desk for designing patterns, and rolls of fabric in every color imaginable that filled the shelves to the ceiling. He had special white light lamps installed that didn't distort colors, a full-length mirror, and a rotating rack for hanging finished pieces. Karina watched the whole process with hands over her mouth, unable to believe what was happening. Leonard, this is too much. I can't accept, she repeated every day, but he simply smiled and kept organizing. When the workshop was finished, Leonard took her hand and led her to the closed door. Close your eyes, he asked with a mischievous smile she had never seen on him. Karina obeyed with her heart in her throat. He opened the door and turned on the lights. Now, open them. What Karina saw in that moment made her legs tremble and her heart fill with such deep love that she knew she could never repay this man for what he was doing for her. The workshop was a dream come true. Karina entered slowly with trembling hands, touching everything as if afraid it would all disappear. The fabrics were organized by color on the shelves, pastels on the left, brights in the center, prints on the right. The sewing machine shone under the white lights, new and perfect, waiting for expert hands to make it sing. The mannequins were positioned by the window overlooking the yard, where natural light poured in generously during mornings. Leonard watched her face lit by emotion, feeling a satisfaction money had never given him. I don't know how to thank you, Karina whispered, spinning in circles to absorb every detail. No one has ever done something like this for me. Not even when my parents were alive did I have a place like this to work. She brought her hands to her face and started crying, but they weren't tears of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude. Leonard approached hesitantly but finally placed a hand on her shoulder gently. You deserve it, Karina. You deserve your talent to be recognized. She looked at him with those honey-colored eyes, shining wet under the light. The following days, Karina dedicated herself to creating with renewed passion. She woke before dawn, prepared breakfast for everyone, took Julian to school, then locked herself in her workshop until afternoon. The sound of the sewing machine became the house's soundtrack, a constant hum indicating there was life and purpose under that roof. Leonard came home from work and found her surrounded by paper patterns with pins between her lips and her hair in a messy ponytail. She showed him her progress shyly at first, but as days passed, she became more confident. Look, I finished this dress for a 10-year-old girl. Do you think it's pretty? Leonard always responded honestly. It's beautiful. Any mother would be proud to see her daughter wearing something like that. And he meant it. Karina's dresses had something special, a warmth mass-produced pieces never had. One Saturday morning, Leonard invited 3 friends from the fashion world he had met at business events. Sophia, owner of a boutique in Uptown, Richard, a fashion photographer, and Daniela, a renowned stylist in Dallas. The 3 arrived curious, but also skeptical. Leonard had told them about a talented seamstress, but gave no more details. Karina greeted them nervously, wiping her sweaty hands on her apron while leading them to the workshop. On the racks hung 8 finished dresses, one lavender with flower embroidery, another deep red with mermaid cut, one mint with lace sleeves, a mustard one with pearl buttons, one wine-colored with elegant drape, a coral one with pleated skirt, an ivory one with gold details, and finally an emerald green with V-neck. Sophia approached the lavender dress and examined it closely, checking seams, finishes, fabric quality. Her serious expression turned to genuine surprise. "This is handmade, right?" she asked, turning to Karina. She nodded timidly. "Every stitch." Richard took photos from various angles, while Daniela tested the fabric drape with expert hands. The silence stretched for several minutes that felt eternal to Karina. Finally, Sophia spoke with a clear and firm voice. "This is professional-level work. Where did you study design?" Karina looked down, ashamed. "I didn't study anywhere. I learned with my mum since I was a kid." The three visitors exchanged incredulous looks. "You're telling me all this you learned empirically?" Daniela asked, pointing to the dresses. "My God, you have impressive natural talent." Richard approached Leonard, who watched from the door with arms crossed and a discreet smile. "Friend, this is gold. Why didn't you introduce me to this woman before?" Leonard shrugged. "I just discovered her myself." Karina was selling her pieces at the flea market for $5. Sophia nearly choked on her coffee. $5? "These dresses are easily worth $100 or $200 each in my boutique and would sell in a week." Karina raised her head surprised, her heart racing. "Seriously?" Sophia nodded emphatically. "Seriously. In fact, I want to order 10 pieces for spring season. I'll pay you $100 per dress, and if they sell well, which I'm sure they will, I'll make monthly orders." Karina's world seemed to stop. $100 per dress meant $1,000 for 10 pieces. It was more money than she had earned in 6 months cleaning houses. That night, after the visitors left with exchanged business cards and scheduled dates, Karina found Leonard in the backyard, looking at the stars. She sat beside him on the iron bench, without saying anything for a moment. The December air was cool but pleasant, scented with the aroma of gardenias growing by the fence. "Thank you," she said finally with a soft voice. "Thank you for believing in me when not even I believed in myself." Leonard looked at her sideways, noting how the moonlight illuminated her profile. "You don't have to thank me. I just gave you the tools. The talent was always there." Karina smiled with tears in her eyes again. It seemed she cried a lot lately, but they were different tears from before. These were tears of hope. "My kids are happy for the first time in years. Julian told me yesterday he wants to be an architect like you when he grows up. Camila draws dresses in her notebooks and says she'll be a designer like her mum." She paused, breathing deeply. "You gave us back our dignity, Leonard. You gave us back our future." He felt a lump in his throat but disguised it by looking at the starry sky. "You gave me back my life. This house was dead before you arrived. Now it has purpose." And in that moment, under the December stars, both understood that what had started as an act of charity had transformed into something much deeper. The weeks before Christmas brought a different energy to the house. Karina worked dedicatedly, fulfilling Sophia's order, while Leonard decorated every corner with Christmas lights and a huge tree in the living room that Julian and Camila adorned with colorful ornaments and endless laughter. The relationship among the four had become natural, as if they had always been a family. Julian no longer called Leonard sir, but simply by name, and sometimes Leo, when excited, telling him about his school grades. The boy had gotten a 90 average on his last exams, an achievement they celebrated with ice cream and movies. Camila, for her part, had adopted Leonard as her personal hero. She waited at the door every afternoon, running to hug him with her chubby little arms, shouting, "Leo is here!" That nickname, born from her small mix-up, had stuck, and Leonard wore it with pride. He made breakfast on Sundays, burning pancakes that the kids ate with feigned enthusiasm, making Karina laugh until her stomach hurt. But beneath all that family joy, something else grew between Leonard and Karina. They were small moments, neither mentioned but both felt. Hands brushing when passing plates at dinner, glances lasting a second too long, late-night conversations in the kitchen, extending into the early hours about dreams and fears. Karina fought those feelings with all her strength. This man had given her everything: a roof, food, tools to work, hope for her kids. How could she repay such kindness by developing romantic feelings? She felt like a taker, as if betraying his trust. Plus, Leonard was a millionaire, owner of properties and companies, while she was just a seamstress from humble origins with 2 kids to raise. They lived in different worlds, but her heart ignored all logic every time he smiled or when she heard him playing with the kids in the yard. She found herself thinking of him at odd hours, imagining what a real life by his side would be like, not just as a grateful guest, but as something more. The guilt consumed her, but the feeling grew inevitably like a plant in the sun. Leonard faced his own internal battle. After his father's death, he had accepted he'd spend the rest of his life alone. At 39, he had a couple of failed relationships with women from his social circle, empty relationships based on appearances and conveniences. None had made him feel what Karina awakened in him with her simple presence. The way she sang country songs while cooking, how she bit her lower lip when concentrated on sewing, her sincere laugh at her kids' antics, the strength with which she had faced losses that would have destroyed weaker people. Leonard had fallen in love without realizing, slowly, like getting used to the sun's warmth after the cold. But how to tell her without ruining everything? She was under his roof, depended on him economically, though working to change that. Any declaration might seem like pressure or taking advantage of her vulnerable position, so he stayed silent, guarding his feelings while enjoying the happiness of having her close, even if only as a friend and protector of her family. Nights were the hardest, when he heard her moving in the next room and wished he could tell her everything he felt. One mid-December afternoon, while Leonard reviewed documents in his study, he heard excited shouts from the yard. He looked out the window and saw Julian teaching Camila to ride a bike, a pink bike with training wheels he had bought the week before. The boy ran beside his sister, holding the seat while she pedaled with her tongue out in concentration. Karina watched from the porch with hands clasped over her chest and a huge smile. Leonard went down the stairs and out to the yard, just as Camila managed to balance for the first time, pedaling alone for almost 10 meters before the training wheels steadied her. "I did it! I did it!" the girl shouted with overflowing joy. Julian raised his arms in victory. Karina clapped with tears of happiness. Leonard approached them, feeling a fullness he never imagined possible. "You're a real champ, Camila," he said, raising his hand for the girl to high-five. She did it with such force she almost fell off the bike, provoking general laughter. In that moment, with the afternoon sun bathing them in golden light, Leonard knew with absolute certainty this was his family, and he'd do whatever necessary to protect it. That same night, after the kids fell asleep, Leonard made a decision. He couldn't keep silent anymore, because life was too short and fragile. His father had taught him that, with his sudden departure. He went down to the kitchen where Karina was making coffee, a nighttime custom they shared when neither could sleep. "Karina, I need to talk to you," he said with a serious voice that made her turn worried. "Did something bad happen?" Leonard shook his head, breathing deeply to gather courage. "It's nothing bad. It's just that 2 months have passed since you arrived, and there's something I need to tell you before it's too late." He approached her, who looked at him with wide eyes. "These have been the best 2 months of my life. You filled this house with joy. You gave meaning to everything. Julian and Camila are incredible kids. And you," he paused, searching for the right words. "You're the bravest, most talented, and beautiful woman I've known. And I know this complicates things. I know I'm probably ruining everything, but I can't keep quiet anymore." Karina set down the cup she held on the table with trembling hands. "Leonard, I'm in love with you, Karina," he confessed finally, letting out the words he had held so long. The silence that followed was broken only by the tick-tock of the wall clock, while 2 hearts beat in unison, waiting for destiny to reveal its next move. Karina felt the world stop. Leonard's words echoed in her ears like a melody she had dreamed of hearing but never dared to expect. Her heart beat so hard she was sure he could hear it. Tears started rolling down her cheeks while she tried to process what had just happened. "Leonard, she started to say, but her voice broke. He took a step forward with shining eyes full of contained emotion. "You don't have to answer now. I just needed you to know. I needed to be honest with you because I can't keep pretending we're just friends when every time I see you my heart races." Karina brought a trembling hand to her chest, feeling butterflies flutter in her stomach. "Do you think I don't feel the same?" she whispered, finally finding her voice. "I've been fighting these feelings for weeks because I thought it was crazy that you'd never notice someone like me." Leonard looked at her incredulous. "Someone like you? Karina, you're extraordinary. You're strong, hard-working, an incredible mother, talented. You're everything any man would want by his side." He approached closer until he was inches from her. "I'm scared," Karina confessed with a trembling voice. "Scared this is a dream and I'll wake up in the plaza again with nothing. Scared of ruining what we've built here. Scared of not being enough for you." Leonard took her hands in his, transmitting warmth and security. "I'm scared too," scared of not being the man you and your kids need. But what I feel for you is stronger than any fear. These 2 months taught me that money, properties, businesses, none of that matters if you have no one to share it with. He caressed her knuckles with his thumbs, a gesture so intimate it made Karina tremble. I want to try, Karina. I want us to be a real family, not just because of circumstances, but because we choose each other. She closed her eyes, letting the tears flow freely. When she opened them, there was determination in her gaze. I want to try too, she whispered. I fell in love with you without realizing, seeing how you treat my kids, how you make me feel valuable, how you filled our void with love. Leonard smiled with a joy that lit up his whole face. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, he leaned toward her and brushed his lips softly. The kiss was sweet and loaded with promises, overcome fears, and renewed hopes. When they separated, both laughed with tears in their eyes, feeling like teenagers experiencing first love. Karina leaned on his chest, listening to his accelerated heartbeats echoing her own. What will we tell Julian and Camila? She asked suddenly with concern. Leonard stroked her hair tenderly. We'll tell them the truth, that we love each other, and I want to care for you not just as a friend, but as someone who truly loves you. He paused thoughtfully. But first I want to do something special. Christmas is just a week away. I want to surprise all 3 of you with something you'll never forget. Karina looked up intrigued. What do you have in mind? Leonard smiled with a mischievous gleam in his eyes. It's a surprise, just trust me. She nodded, because trusting him had become as natural as breathing. They spent the rest of the night in the kitchen talking softly about shared dreams, future plans, and the 1,000 small things that make 2 people connect deeply. The following days, Leonard was absent for hours with vague excuses about urgent business. Karina suspected he was planning something, but didn't ask, enjoying the anticipation. Julian noticed the change in the house's atmosphere. Mom, are you and Leo together now? He asked one afternoon while she sewed and he did homework. Karina blushed to her ears. Why do you ask that, my son? The boy shrugged with wisdom beyond his 8 years. You look at each other different, like my aunts and uncles did when they fell in love. Karina set down her sewing and knelt in front of her son, taking his hands. Would it bother you if Leo and I were more than friends? Julian shook his head emphatically. Not at all. Leo is great. He teaches me math and takes me to the park. Plus, he makes you happy, and it's been a long time since I saw you this content. Karina's eyes filled with tears again. That seemed her natural state. I love you so much, my handsome boy. She hugged him tight, while he patted her back awkwardly. Camila came running in at that moment with a drawing of a family of 4 smiling under a bright yellow sun. Look what I made. It's us, she pointed to the figures. That's you, Mummy. That's Julian. That's me. And that's Leo. And in that childish drawing was captured the deepest truth. They were already a family. It just needed to be made official. Christmas Eve dawned cold but clear, with a sky so blue it seemed painted. Leonard woke nervous, checking every detail of his plan for the 10th time. He had hired a professional landscaper to transform the backyard into something magical. Warm white lights hung from the trees, creating a luminous canopy. He had installed a small clear wood walkway in the middle of the lawn, and at the back placed an arch decorated with white flowers and green foliage. Karina's dresses hung on racks along the walkway, strategically lit like in an art gallery. On a side table was a black velvet box holding 2 rings, one engagement ring for Karina with a discreet but beautiful diamond, and 2 smaller rings with their names engraved, symbolizing his commitment to Julian and Camila. Richard had come early to set up lights and take professional photos of the moment. Sophia brought additional flowers and helped organize the dresses. Daniela prepared the house with aromatic candles and extra Christmas decoration. Everything was ready. Leonard breathed deeply, looking in the mirror. Grey dress pants, impeccable white shirt, casual black jacket. He looked good, but he was terrified. What if she said no? What if it was too soon? At 6 p.m., when the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and pink, Leonard knocked on Karina's bedroom door. She opened curiously, looking beautiful in a simple cream dress she had sewn herself. What's going on? You look very elegant. He smiled nervously. I have a surprise for you and the kids. Can you come down to the yard in 10 minutes? Karina nodded, intrigued. Leonard went down the stairs with his heart pounding so hard he thought it would explode. He turned on all the yard lights, and the result was magical, like from a fairy tale. The lights twinkled softly, creating a warm and welcoming atmosphere. Karina's dresses shone under the perfect lighting, each displaying its colors and details like masterpieces. He heard steps on the stairs and turned. Karina appeared first with Julian and Camila holding hands. The three stopped short, seeing the transformed yard. Camila let out a squeal of amazement. Julian's eyes widened huge. Karina brought her hands to her mouth with instant tears springing from her eyes. "Leonard, what is all this?" she whispered, walking slowly toward the lit yard. "These are your dresses," Leonard said, guiding them along the improvised walkway. "I wanted you to see them as the rest of the world sees them, as art, as beauty, as the extraordinary talent you have." Karina walked among her creations, touching them with trembling fingers. Julian and Camila ran among the lights laughing, marveled by the transformation of the yard they knew. Leonard led her to the flower arch, where the lights shone brightest. There he stopped, took both of Karina's hands, and looked directly into her eyes. "3 months ago my life had no meaning. I walked through the plaza every day searching for something I didn't know I needed until I saw you. I saw a brave mother fighting for her kids. I saw a woman full of dignity despite having everything against her. I saw someone who taught me that true value isn't in what you have, but in who you are." His voice trembled with emotion. Julian and Camila approached silently, sensing something important was happening. Karina cried openly while listening to every word, etching it in her memory forever. "I fell in love with you, Karina. I fell in love with your strength, your kindness, how you love your kids, how you find beauty amid adversity." Leonard pulled the black velvet box from his pocket and knelt on the grass. Karina gasped, bringing her hands to her heart. Julian took his sister's hand, squeezing it tight, both with shining eyes. "Will you marry me? Will you build a real family with me? Not just you, but also Julian and Camila." He opened the box, revealing the 3 rings shining under the yard lights. "I want to be your husband, and I want to be the dad to these incredible kids. I want this house to be our home, not because I give it to you, but because we build it together." He took out the 2 small rings and turned to the kids with his knee still on the ground. "Julian, Camila, will you let me be your dad? Will you let me care for you, teach you, love you as you deserve to be loved?" His voice broke on the last phrase while tears finally rolled down his cheeks. He had waited his whole life to be a father and never imagined it would happen like this, but he wouldn't change a thing. Julian was the first to react. He ran to Leonard and hugged him tight, sobbing against his shoulder. "Yes, yes, I want you to be my dad." Camila followed immediately, wrapping her little arms around Leonard's neck. "Leo is going to be our real dad." Leonard hugged them both, feeling his heart expand so much it hurt with happiness. When he looked up, Karina was kneeling in front of them with her face soaked in tears, smiling with more love than Leonard had ever seen in anyone. "Yes," she said with a clear and firm voice despite the crying. "Yes, I want to marry you. Yes, I want you to be my kid's dad. Yes, to everything." Leonard placed the ring on her trembling finger while she laughed and cried at the same time. Then he took Julian and Camila's little hands and put on their rings, sealing the commitment with all 3. They stood and melted into a group hug, where laughter, tears, words of love, and whispered promises mixed. The yard lights shone around them like silent witnesses to a miracle. Richard captured every moment with his camera, immortalizing the birth of a family forged not by blood, but by love and choice. The night continued with a special dinner Leonard had prepared with help from a chef friend. Steaming red pozole, tamales of various flavors, Mexican rice, and cowboy beans. For dessert, there were fritters with honey and hot chocolate with cinnamon. They ate in the dining room decorated with candles and flowers, laughing and sharing dreams for the future. Julian asked if he could change his last name to Leonard's, and he replied they'd do all the legal paperwork needed for adoption. Camila wanted to know if now she could call them both Mom and Dad, and Karina replied through tears that nothing would make her happier. After dinner, they opened gifts under the Christmas tree. Leonard gave the kids tablets for their studies, new clothes, and toys that made them scream with excitement. To Karina, he gave a state-of-the-art computerized embroidery machine she had mentioned once in conversation. She gave him a hand-knitted grey scarf she made in secret during nights, and a photo album with moments from the last 3 months that he would treasure forever. When the kids finally fell asleep on the sofa, exhausted from so much emotion, Leonard and Karina carried them to their beds and tucked them in with forehead kisses. Then they went out to the still-lit yard and sat on the iron bench looking at the stars. "Thank you for saving me," Karina whispered, resting her head on Leonard's shoulder. "Thank you for letting me love you," he responded, kissing her forehead. And there, under the Dallas night sky on Christmas Eve, 2 broken souls found healing in each other's arms, and 2 children found the home they always deserved. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more stories that will reach your soul. May God abundantly bless your life, your family, and fill your path with true love, unexpected opportunities, and moments that mark your existence forever. Remember, it's never too late to start over, and love always finds its way back home. Until the next story.